All right. Good morning or good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right. Thank you all for coming to our artist conversation today. My name is Daryl Brown. I serve as the director for social justice here at Trinity United Church of Christ. Uh, we're excited. We're excited. This has been a wonderful exhibit. It's been very well received, very interesting. I could feel the passion in the work. Uh, Pastor Moss introduced us to Torian, myself, and LaShondra, who's our media director. And I don't know, we had about 4 months to figure this thing out. And I have to say, I'm pretty pleased with everything that went on. And since I only gave myself 3 minutes to talk, I'm going to go into the opening prayer. Oh, Creator, we thank you for these opportunities to share other perspectives, to invite creativity into our midst. We thank you for people that care, people that recognize some of the challenges in our world. And we just ask, Lord, that you be with us as we uh, feel, as we exercise our empathy muscles, and as we move from angst to action. We ask these and all things in the most wonderful name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. So that's it for me, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Mitch Mitch Anderson, one of our servant leaders, co-servant leaders of our Artists in Residence ministry.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Daryl. We're doing a mic switch. All right. Am I still good? All right. Welcome, everybody. As Daryl said, my name is Mitch Anderson. I'm co-chair of Artists in Residence here at Trinity United Church of Christ. We've been on a great artistic journey over my time with the church, over 20 plus years. Myself and my artist compatriot and fellow co-chair of the ministry, Patrick Thompson. Patrick, turn around, wave to the live stream. So our journey here, our mission is straightforward yet far-reaching. Basically, our purpose, our ministry's purpose, is to take the complicated, ethereal, spiritual, sometimes, what's the good word? Sometimes, intimidating world of art. So if you've ever been to a exhibit and felt like, wow, like I wanna say something about this exhibit, but it's so, I feel like I should be more important. I feel like I should have a more fancy word to say. So our ministry's mission over the years has been to make art accessible. And that we've done that in a number of ways, or at least tried to do that. We've tried to take that awesome responsibility as ministry partners to make the world of art more accessible, less intimidating, less mysterious to our members and to the community at large. One of the ways we've done that is by the amount of classwork that we've done. We did a rough count. We've taught, since 2002, we've taught roughly 400 plus students over the time, all types of art concepts, whether it's just the painting basics, art history, technical drawing, doing composition, any number of things for our young artists. That has been a big focus. And then we've done a number of collaborations, like this project that we're going to talk about today, where we collaborate with outside artists, educational institutions, and a number of other opportunities like that over the years, where we've brought in a number of folks. And Daryl and his team have been a great partner with us over the years in helping us to continue to follow our mission, which is to make the world of art more accessible to all of us. And so that leads us to the exhibit that we currently have on display that Daryl was talking about, that has been a months-long project with our primary curator today and a couple of the artists who are represented in the show. So the name of the show is Ye Shall Inherit the Earth, and it is a commentary and kind of an ode to communities of color, communities that have proximity to power, but find themselves trying to exist in this world, particularly communities of Palestinian and of African American descent. So I would not be able to do it full justice, but to bring up Dr. Torian Webb, who, once we begin bringing the artists up, I'll give you a full, at least an attempt to tell you all the amazing work he's done. But please give a round of applause for Professor Dr. Torian Webb from DePaul University. Yeah, right there, man. So the way we're going to do this is Dr. Webb and I will have a quick chat, and then we'll bring up a couple of our artists who have been so gracious as to make themselves available. Okay? All right, so first off, how you doing, man?
I'm okay.
How was that drive in? Do you guys hear him?
Am I heard okay?
Yeah.
Okay. The drive-in was okay. You know, it's colder outside than I would have liked for it to be, but I'm doing well.
Good.
Happy to be here.
So I want to get into the exhibit itself. I want you to educate folks on the exhibit itself. But before we do that, could you tell everybody about the run-up to the exhibit, the thoughts behind it, and what kind of led to the genesis? Your work, you know, in diasporic type of studies, and then kind of what was the genesis of the project?
Right. So first, I just want to take a quick second to give a quick word of thanks, you know, for all of the communities that kind of brought me into this place, communities for whom my work would never have been possible. My spouse, Tiana, is somewhere in the house and in the back there. She has believed in this project from day one when I didn't necessarily. My kids are back there. My parents were wonderful enough to make the trip. So I'm grateful for them as well as all of the institutional bodies that have supported this project. A quick shout out to Dr. Judith Weisenfeld and the Crossroad Project for generously funding this. Religion, Conflict, and Peace Initiative at Harvard, CARS at Columbia, Manny Real Films, my DePaul University co-sponsors, Department of African and Black Diaspora Studies, Center for Black Diaspora, and STRC. Thank you all so much. So and all of those whose names did not come to me in the last 30 seconds. Really quickly, just in terms of a quick run-up. So there were two kind of moments for me that I like to think about it as anchoring my work on Black Palestinian transnationalism. So one, several years ago when, at the time, Alice Walker, one of the great poets of our tradition, her, at the time, most recent book of poetry came out, A Cushion in the Road. And there were a couple pieces in that collection that were critical of the Israeli military occupation. And I was paying attention to the critical reception. Hey, Andrea. I was paying attention to the critical reception, and she was getting critiques of being anti-Semitic, un-American. And, you know, I know Walker is not an uncomplicated figure, but I was thinking to myself, they were saying this about black folks in the height of McCarthyism, right? So
Exactly.
I got curious. So I started trying to think about, well, what is this place called Historic Palestine? At the time, I didn't even know where Palestine was on a map, right? So that sparked my intellectual curiosity, what I like to think of as my intellectual baptism of sorts. It happened to be right when I came on board at the Samuel Wood Proctor Conference, faith-based justice organization in Chicago, who had just named Palestine justice as an organizational priority. I came on board. I started working with some of Proctor's burgeoning Middle East portfolio. That's when I took my first trip to the region. This would have been in early 2015, I believe, and that I understand as more of a spiritual baptism. So these two moments together as kind of what most compelled me as a black man in the U.S. right? Trying to think seriously about the experiences of persons in the world that in some ways are very different, but strangely familiar to my own. And then you fast forward a couple years, I was on fellowship at the Religion, Conflict, and Peace Initiative at Harvard that commissioned me to produce an art exhibit that centered some of my interest in Black Palestinian transnationalism, brought together a couple handful of artists, either from the African diaspora, the Palestinian exilic migration, and the Lebanese exilic migration of one Lebanese artist, all kind of around this idea of using human portraiture, capturing of the human form as a way to tell us something about the relationship between humanity and the sacred. And this was right at the beginning of the pandemic, so we had to think about a different way to kind of mediate it virtually and digitally. And you fast forward a couple more years to the beginning of this year, and the Crossroads Project, which is a partnership with the Henry Luce Foundation, funded the work. And allowed us to arrive at this moment where we have one final display, which is what's upstairs in the narthex, as well as it will allow us to complete the short film project that's a companion to this exhibit that we plan to drop in the summer of this year.
Excellent, excellent. And so to be clear, this project had been long in your thoughts, germinating before the conflict in Palestine escalated to where the average citizen might be higher in its consciousness. So obviously this project was larger reaching and had a bigger scope all along. Is that fair?
Yes, I do think that's fair. You know, one important caveat for me to make, there's an important way in which for at least several decades, conflict in historic Palestine has always been in this current state of escalation, right? The present moment of a kind of disproportionate violence that has reached our U.S. national consciousness in the past year, did yes come after, you know, this project was long in the works. But it's important for me to recognize that when thinking about the experiences of the experience particularly, but not exclusively, particularly of Palestinians in region, right, in historic Palestine, there is no there is no such thing as a kind of de-escalated violence, right? Kind of impacted against them.
Right. Yeah. So this has been a state of conflict that, again, might not necessarily or sporadically raises to the level of consciousness for Americans, but for folks in the region, it's obviously a much different thing.
Yeah, and for U.S. Americans in particular, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so before we bring up a couple of artists, tell us about what made you, who did you think of, you know, as the project began to form in your head, artists that you thought could be part of it, maybe these are artists or artists you got to know just through the refining of the vision. Sure.
So in terms of who I was thinking of, kind of who was in my head, I'm always thinking about questions of audience, right? And I'm always thinking about what kinds of communities might experience the project, right? I am a scholar of Black religion, right? In Black religious history, I am a son of Black religious institutions, right? Afro-Protestant tradition, Black church in particular. So I'm always thinking about these folks, and I wanted to think about creative pieces, right? Artworks that, in a way, came from African diasporic, Palestinian and Lebanese communities organically, but didn't necessarily give us the visuals of explicit postures of resistance, right? I wanted to allow
more indirect.
yeah, more indirect. I mean, giving folks, giving our communities here a different kind of entry point, right? Because it's one thing to kind of have as an entry point into hyper-militarized violence, kind of images of the violence, right? And I think that's important. But it's also important, especially when having some of these conversations about what's happening kind of elsewhere in the world, but bringing the conversations kind of to Black U.S. to kind of mediate them in a way that resonates, right, theologically, experientially, sociologically, with, in some ways, with Black U.S. experience. So I wanted to kind of shift the focus to something that might be, as weary as I am of like universalist language, there's something about what is represented by the human form that is strangely common, right? You know, one thing I was planning on saying, you know, later, this is what allows me as a Black dude from Pittsburgh to walk up to the narthex and see a photo of Jenny's great-grandmother, a Palestinian woman, and think
Like
about
see a commonality.
Think about my maternal great-grandmother, right? Whose photos we have. My mother's grandmother. My mom might be in the room. Based on complexion alone, on a quick glance, she could just as well been my kin, right? So what does it mean for folks in this community, in this Trinity community, to walk upstairs and experience a project and experience images of folks who are from a different part of the world entirely, or maybe from this corner of the world, but you know, the inflection is a little bit different. I'm thinking about Andrea's work, thinking about Max's work, and to see in each of these images, this could have just as well been any of our aunties and sisters and cousins. So I tried to think about artists alongside this vision who could kind of bring us closer to something that is something essentially human, right? The particularity of these artists' artworks represented, I think, captures something that is strangely common in the human experience.
Okay. No, that's
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I wanted to say for the audience, the works are focused on portraitures, and so that kind of ties into what Dr. Webb is talking about, because you see, you know, the stories that are told across someone's face represented in a portraiture or a portrait type of work. So that's the interesting bridge.
He said this much more eloquently than I just did. Like the stories that are told kind of across someone's face, I think perfectly captures that.
Yeah. Well, let's bring some artists up. So let's pick on our first. Max Sansing is a child of Chicago. He's one of our most prolific mural artists in the country. We have had him here in Trinity in the past. Come on up, Max Sansing. Give Max some, y'all. We also have Andrea Coleman. Andrea is a Chicago-based artist. Andrea works in various media. And then standing in for her late father, Charles Haddad, we have Jenny Haddad. Father is a photographer. So come on up, Jenny. So let's get into some things. So Max, I'm gonna pick on you first. Tell the audience about the type of work you do. Tell the audience a little bit about the journey that got you started in art. And we'll get to the actual exhibit work, but just give them a little bit of your origin story.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Max, and I'm from the South Side of Chicago, particularly the Avalon Park area. And I've been doing murals in the city of Chicago for nearly over 25 years and abroad as well. Basically, my journey started through Chicago Public Schools and then Chicago Summer Arts Programs, Gallery 37, things like that. And I have a really good background in the Chicago Black mural tradition, then also community mural tradition. And so I kind of came up through that in doing graffiti art, my own fine art in my studio, and then also ultimately a lot of murals, mural programs. So a lot of murals that you've probably seen on the South Side and all over the city. I probably had some type of involvement with it just over the years. And it's just been really rich, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Max. We'll ask a bit more. So I don't want to make each person go in any order. So I'm gonna ask. I'll throw this one, and both Andrea and Jenny can take your turn at this. How did the origin story of coming to the project? How did that happen? So Andrea. Are you on? Yeah, you're on. You're on.
Hello, King. Okay. So I actually, I think in terms of this project, how did I get? And I think I knew Kimberly, and we were able to talk. I think that was our connection. And I had a few pieces that I had already made. I don't know if she told you about me or how that came to be. Okay. But yeah, that was our connection. And then we were able to continue on doing kind of a presentation. I was invited to do a presentation in Evanston and Northwestern and showcase a lot of my work that I had up. And these were portraitures of people within my family and my community that I seen as kind of sort of these deities in my eyes that were monumental to me. I grew up in Chicago Heights, so the works was basically based off oral histories. So what I would do is kind of take work and based off what I heard from, being nosy in front of, our, adults at the table, I kind of did this overlaying of processes for the memory to where the photos look distorted. However, in the end, would eventually embrace the essence of the person that I learned about or I heard about and stories about through my uncles and our aunties, like perspectives. Because I know if you go to your auntie, they have a different perspective of one person. You go to your uncle, they have a different perspective. You go to your cousins, they got a different perspective. So it was these overlayings of personalities and characteristics that I find that kind of made up myself, because at the time it was a journey that I was trying to figure out who my identity was as a Black woman. I grew up in Chicago Heights and then came to Chicago, but a lot of people, of course, in my family originated from Chicago. So who was I to make essentially my mark in the world? And so legacy is something that really centers around my work.
Very good, very good.
And can I just jump? So Mitch has asked me to kind of jump in from time to time to help fill out parts of the story. So I'm doing what the host asked me to do, just to kind of fill out some more of the details. So I was at a previous institution in Evanston. Some former students in here, some of y'all might remember this. I was putting on a Black History Month art exhibit. This was my first kind of hand at a professional creative endeavor. And I reached out to a gallery owner who, just one of my favorite people in the city, Kim Atwood, you might be watching Kim, at Elephant Room Gallery, and I told her what I was looking for. Andrea's name was one of the names that came up. I fell in love with Andrea's work immediately. I invited her to do a show at my former institution, and when this project came up, I knew the vision I had, and I knew that Andrea's work would fit centrally into that. There's something about kind of how I hope a little bit later you talk about this mysticism part that we talked about a couple years ago. How she feels called to, in her language, called to particular family photos, right? Old family photos, and digitally augments them and blows them up to enormous printed scale. There's something about her works that just always capture me, right? Something about the works I always kind of feel drawn into, and I knew that that's an aspect of this project that I wanted to take really, really seriously. So that's part of how she got to this table.
That's good. And last one on this, Andrea, did you select the pieces? Was Dr. Webb involved? Like, did you guys have a collaborative process of selecting them?
So yeah, I had some existing pieces, and after I did the presentation at Evanston, he liked them so much, he was like, let me keep some of these, and we'll figure out what we're going to do with them later. And I was like, okay. They weren't currently on sale or anything, so I was like, sure, go ahead. But these were like the most portrait-based images, so I do snapshot actual things of events as well. But these were focused on, one of them is of my mom. That was the first ever piece I had worked on. And I never really could connect to my mom in terms of our like looks, but for whatever reason in this particular piece, she looked just like me. So it was this weird call to like moment to where I was like, well, I'm working towards what my identity is as an artist. How do I connect that through my ancestors and the people that kind of raised me and were, the reason why I am who I am today.
Good. All right, Jenny. You're up. So you had an interesting pathway into the project through some work from your dad. I wanted to read something that your dad wrote. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I pulled this from his artist statement. Portraiture compelled me from the beginning of my relationship with photography. Just as the design of a building is the disciplined creation of a space for human activity, the composition of a portrait is the disciplined creation of a space for a human person, their physical and spiritual reality. How one composes a portrait is like how the architect designs a compelling relationship between form, function, materials, and context, it all with the end goal of hosting life. That was pretty powerful. So tell us about the journey that brought your father's work into the show.
Sure. So, am I on? Yeah, okay. My parents moved in with me into 2019 because that's what Palestinian parents do. They move in with a daughter. And, in the process of combining households, we're trying to make everybody's stuff fit. And almost the first box I opened of stuff that my mom was like, I don't know what's in that box, on top was the photograph one of the photographs that's in this exhibit, which is Yola's sister. Mm-hmm. And my father had been a photographer my whole life. Whenever we were on vacation or whatever, he was always like, oh, stop, we got to take a picture. And we used to kind of, as kids, make fun of him a little bit. But I had never seen this picture. And so I said, Baba, who took this picture? And he said, I took that picture. I said, you took this picture? And the box was full of pictures that none of us had ever seen. And we realized that they were all pictures he took before he had kids, before he got married, when he was a bachelor, living in either Kuwait, working as a single young man, like so many Palestinians lived and worked in Kuwait in the 50s and 60s, because after they left Palestine, they had nowhere to go. They weren't allowed to work usually in the countries directly adjacent to Palestine. So his parents were in Lebanon, or in Syria originally, and he had to leave to go find somewhere where he could work. And so he was working in Kuwait, and he had been introduced to photography as a kid in that his aunts and uncles had pitched together to buy him like one of the original little brownie box cameras. when he was a teenager because they felt sorry for him because here it was this 14-year-old boy who had lost everything, and they wanted to distract him, like on his birthday.
And lost everything. Why?
Because they were Nakba, like survivors, basically. My father's family was forced to leave Jerusalem in 1948. And they, went across the border into Syria expecting to come back 2 weeks later and never returned. So they, bought him this camera just to kind of give him something to occupy him, and he was intrigued by it. And then he told a story to me later about how when he was a little older and they were still in Syria, he saw a portrait in the window of a photography studio and of this very distinguished German gentleman. And he was so intrigued by it that he went into the store to ask, how can I make a picture like that? Like, my camera doesn't do that. And the gentleman who ran the store was like, of course your camera doesn't do that. You need a really expensive camera to do that. And detailed all the kinds of camera he needed to make that. And my father was like, that's totally beyond our means. We're never going to do that. But then when he was later a bachelor working in Kuwait, he basically got a side hustle, to his regular job, and realized that, he had been sending his entire paycheck home to his parents every single month. And he realized that his parents weren't aware of the side hustle. And so he was going to use some of that money to buy himself a real camera. And he started taking photographs of his fellow Palestinians in Kuwait. And then when he would travel back to visit family, he started taking pictures of family. And the photos in the exhibit are those from that series of family pictures. And they came to the exhibit because of actually a past colleague of Dr. Webb's, who's sitting here now, Dr. Jenny Moe, who had seen Torian's invitation, for artists, and she reached out to me. She sent it to me, and she goes, Jenny, don't you know any artists? I remember that you're Palestinian, but do you know any artists? And at that point, I had started, having discovered this box, I had started sitting with my dad every night after dinner, cataloging these photos and asking him, who's in this picture? Why did you take it the way you took it? Where did you take it? How was it meaningful to you? And writing all this stuff down, because I knew this was our only chance to do this. And I kind of said, yeah, I know who I could sort of spread that invitation to, but I was also thinking, I think I might have an artist in my house. And then finally broached the conversation with my dad. It's like, I'd like to submit some of your pictures to this show. And he, thought I was completely nuts. Yeah, he was like, I took those pictures for myself, whatever. And the rest is history.
Can I just jump in here really quickly? So one of the things that I'm hearing now, and I have some of my former students in the room from my Black Religion and Chicago class. We would have talked about this before, but there's something interestingly resonant across different kinds of cultural experiences. This question of kind of sitting with one's elders, right? Sitting at the feet of one's elders while we can, right? So this is someone, I'm speaking as someone who has, a set of parents. My parents kind of in our home. So I'm part of an intergenerational household. There is something interesting about kind of sitting with one's elders to kind of, so that they can help us kind of help guide our way. That is going to be very familiar feeling to Black folks, right? And also a whole lot of other kind of folks, right? And this is one of those moments, and I just wanted to flag that because this is, for me, not just the pieces in the exhibit, but also the kinds of experiences that I always hoped the exhibit would open up for folks. Yeah. It feels oddly resonant, and that's part of what I've always wanted to capture.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. All right, Max. So tell us, Jenny, that was excellent, by the way. I'm just picturing an uncle of mine who took a lot of photos of family members and just was kind of, you know, like a documentarian, basically. So thank you for that. Max, how do you feel this project, like did you find that you had to think about your work and how it might fit? Were you in the middle of working on any piece? Like, did this project inform any work that you were doing either at the time or now that you've been a part of it?
Actually, no. So Dr. Webb, he actually owned a piece that I did with a fellow artist, Shadi Crow, Super Sankofa, that's up top. And then I had a piece at the time that was called Stranded on Stony Island that I had available when he reached out to me. A lot of my work definitely pulls from a kind of ancestral place. When you're younger, you're doing art, it kind of feels like it's a very insular kind of self journey where you're just kind of like worried about what you want to do and how you want to do it. But you don't, once you kind of get into the history of things, you realize that you are kind of carrying on and practicing in a tradition that's a lot older than you. And I pull upon the spirit of my father and other artists that I've known. I got into art at a time where it wasn't cool to be a young black kid painting and drawing. And so a lot of my peers were older artists. And in hearing their stories and, you know, I kind of got a really good education at a young age on what it meant to be an artist, the highs and lows of it. And a lot of my work kind of deals with a lot of that, me kind of just going on and carrying on these stories and my own personal stories in relation to the things that I've learned. And so I honestly was happy that he had this project going on, and I knew the work would be relevant to it.
Mm-hmm. How much of your work now, Max, is mural focused versus gallery work? Like, what's coming for you?
To be transparent, I'm kind of at a artist block with my studio work, and a lot of my mural work has definitely consumed a lot of my attention. But doing a mural is kind of like a social experiment because, you know, I would always worry about my art and think of like, you know, I don't know, if the world was ending, is my art practical to anybody? And, you know, the mural work, you get to see live and in person while you're creating it in the space, what it does and how it impacts. And you hear hundreds of stories. And since I've been able to do it and it's taken me to different places around the world, just hearing all the different commonalities of those things, it's a lot of stuff that I could take and pour back into my studio work to kind of push through this kind of creative block that I've been having. And so, yeah, the mural work, I love it. It's awesome. I learned so much. I get way more of an education painting outside and talking to people as opposed to being cooped up in my studio. And so, for as long as I can do it, because it's very difficult, you know, I want to kind of just get the best education and experiences that I can.
That's great. And just for the folks that are streaming, there is a link to all the works that we're talking about here. So the folks here who are in person have taken in the exhibit upstairs. But just want to make sure that everybody knows you can actually access all the works that are part of the exhibit. So Andrea, for you, do you feel that this exhibit has helped change anything, has helped change any view on the work that you see yourself doing moving forward? Like how has selecting pieces to be in this potentially influenced work that you might do moving forward?
I think this song, okay. For me, I'll kind of get into like my process. As Dr. Webb said, how I select work is entirely intuitive, and it's mostly a call to. It's not something I plan ahead. Even how my process is kind of laid out, it's not a combination of anything. Like A plus B, this is the same ritual that I do each time. Each time I work on a piece is different for me each and every time, because the story is different, the person is different, the qualities of the actual photo is different. Just like I think Jenny talked about in terms of her dad kind of taking all these photos. My mom was like she was like the matriarch of her family, so she had all the stories. So I was the sounding board as I grew up of those stories. She was pretty much like the in-home therapist for everyone, that she was the mother figure for everyone. She was the caretaker. So everyone came to her about the stories that they had, whether they be traumatic or not. And growing up, of course, like in a black neighborhood, it was a lot of trauma behind it. But I also grew up in terms of love and celebration. So that was something I wanted to showcase within my work, where a lot of the erratic colors and the colorful nature of my work is based on the celebration of their life, whether they're deceased or still living. These are very important people that I kind of wanted to showcase, especially I went to Columbia College, so all I did see was, white figures on white walls, and that was my only reference that I can go to. And I was like, well, the reference that I can go to is the people within my family. These are very beautiful people that made me who I am today, made me a strong individual who I am today. How can I represent them in a way that they have their pedestal to be on? Because I thought they were the same in terms of, what I saw in the blue chip galleries. I was like, they the same monumental figures to me. How do I bring this forth to where I can continue this sense of legacy that was tied to my identity? So my work kind of got shaped into what's the importance of legacy. Sitting down with people in my family and talking about the stories and what those significance was. Like, I learned something new every day. Sometimes people are like, you're not ready to know that. You'll know that in a couple of years. So it's something I keep getting new information. I keep finding photos that I've never known or people I've never heard about. So as I move forward, how this exhibition has informed me, it will be to continue that legacy of intuitive process making, intuitive selection, to where, how I say it is, I create more of a ripple and outreach to people that want to also preserve the legacy of their ancestors and people in their family.
That's great. That's great. I'm going to ask you, Dr. Webb, to talk about some of the artists that aren't represented here, but I just wanted to ask Jenny another quick question. Like, as you were looking through your father's catalog, like, tell everybody, like, was there any common theme? Like, did he tend to just catch people in candid moments? Did he tend to, like, ask them to, like what kind of themes or threads did you see through the subjects that he picked?
And I'd ask you to put a particularly fine point on this question of how he works with, like, light and shadows.
No, he was very intentional about posing people. Like, I asked him that question. And it's not that he wasn't interested in candid moments, but I think there was so much about trying to capture a person as sort of themselves, like that he didn't want there to sort of be static, like, to that. And I really do believe that, we joke about him not thinking about himself as an artist, but he really was taking these pictures, I believe, as a way of trying to keep family members with him, because, the reality of the Palestinian diaspora and the reality of the Nakba is that it tore families apart. And as a very young man, you were separated from all these people that you used to go to Sunday dinner with every single week, like, and then you never saw again. And so there was definitely something that he was almost trying to catch, like, the essence of this person, like, and wanted to make sure that he got all of it. And I think the light and the dark that you see, especially in like Eula's sister and in some of the others, there's a series that you haven't seen yet, but I should probably share with you at some point, of fellow workers in Kuwait, where he's very much trying to make people clearly 3D, like clearly taking up space, clearly like sculptural in some ways, because it's like it's not just that when you're far away from someone you can't like maybe remember what they look like, but their whole like presence is like gone, and there's very much this sense that he's trying to capture the 360 of people, even though there's only one angle in the camera.
And this reminds me, Andrea, of something that you said a couple years ago when we were interviewing for the film, and you were talking about like the scale of your pieces, right? They're two-dimensional, right? But they have because of the size of them or kind of what you try to augment kind of in the image itself, these two-dimensional pieces have a kind of three-dimensionality to them, right? And again, that's always been interesting to me because you were talking about it in terms of kind of three-dimensionality that almost pulled people into their orbit, into the work's orbit. So this is part of what my ear is listening to, kind of as I listen across traditions precisely for these sorts of resonances.
No, that's good. That's good. Well, I definitely want you to take a moment, if you can, just talk about some of the other artists that are involved in the project and couldn't be here today, so folks can at least hear it.
Sure. So the first artist I'll lift up is a sister named Shireen Dahmer, and Shireen Creates is her artist name. Shireen is a Palestinian artist based in Chicago. Hey, Shireen. She planned to be with us here today. She wasn't feeling well. I hope you're feeling better. I know you're joining us virtually. Shireen's work, they're digital portraits. They're particularly kind of frontal busts, and we have a couple of her images on view upstairs. But Shireen's work, really, in my estimation, she's far too humble to ever say this herself. I'll say it. Her work really grew to national and international prominence in the height of the movement for Black Lives, the BLM era. Particularly her Ahmaud Arbery portrait. George Floyd was another one. Her Breonna Taylor portrait, famous portrait. The Breonna Taylor is the portrait that's upstairs. You all have seen these images before. They circulate everywhere. And not only did I love Shireen's work, but I also had a deep appreciation for her ethic as an organizer, as an activist. So I was connected to Shireen by a brother of mine in the movement. He said, hey, I have a little sister who's a great artist. I looked into her work. I loved it. I recognized how high profile she was. I reached out and I had read an article, I think in a local paper that was talking about a Minneapolis paper that was talking about the George Floyd killing, and the interviewer was interviewing Shireen, and one thing that I believe she said in the interview, you all interviewing me for this medium, that's cool. I don't mind talking about this stuff. I know this George Floyd image you all are particularly drawn to. I'm fine being here for this. I ask, however, as a Palestinian woman, I ask that you privilege the voices of Black artists in this city who are doing the same kind of work, right? Yeah. Right. And reading that was the moment that I recognized we gotta find a way to include this work. So I'm deeply grateful for Shireen and her work. Steve Wana is another artist I'll lift up. Steve is a Lebanese artist based in DC metro area. Steve's three-dimensional.
And just real quickly, we're gonna start questions. So if anybody's got Q&A, start thinking about that. There's a microphone here in the center aisle. Okay, feel free to get your thoughts together and come on up to the center aisle. But I'm sorry, continue, man. Tell about Steve.
I'll go. Yeah, sorry, y'all. So Steve, DC-based artist. He has a sculpture upstairs that's a light installation. It's also a sound installation, and he understands this as a kind of sculptural portrait of sorts. Definitely check that out. Grateful to Steve. I think you're also tuning in virtually. Luxi Turner is a Palestinian-Australian artist. She has a self-portrait of herself in a field at what is typically portrayed as a colonial landscape, in a field with indigenous Palestinian garb. That she tells a story. She woke up one day, grabbed a camera, and grabbed a dress from her mother's closet, and ran out to the film and caught inspiration. And several other artists that I definitely, I won't lift them up, their names up here, but in addition to the artists here and a few that I mentioned, for those in the space, definitely check out the QR code that's on the bottom of the banner right outside, and that'll take you to the project site. You'll see bios and other information on all the artists, as well as photos, trailers, and other things. But I'm so grateful for the artists in the project, who might be tuning in virtually, and those who are not.
Excellent. All right. So do we have any questions? Don't hesitate. Okay, Daryl, come on up.
All right, here we go. So my question is for Jenny. We see maps that represent what's gone on over time with Palestine and Israel. I am really curious as where we might be able to see some of your dad's photos of these early days.
So he did not, if you want pictures within Palestine,
Just of the people,
of the people.
wherever they might be in
So
diaspora.
I think this is an interesting thing that's going to be, like it's starting in the last few years already to kind of come to the fore, where collections of photographs by all sorts of Palestinians are being published because people are, frankly, finally finding the margin in their lives to do things like that. Though now we have, loss of margin again. So they exist, like collections of photographs of historic Palestine, from as early as there were photographs, and cameras, through to the Nakba. But it is like the physical challenge of the Nakba experience is that most people left what they owned. And most of what was left was either destroyed or looted. There are probably thousands of photographs in the Israeli archives that no one has ever seen since they were taken from homes and things like that. So if you all want to write letters and ask people to let us in, we'd like to go see our pictures.
Or do research.
Yes, exactly. So photographs are out there, and in the last few years, several of them have been published into collections. The whole culture, one of the things about getting involved in this exhibit that was interesting for me is it made me look a little bit more systematically at the Palestinian art scene, which frankly, as a woman at the top of her child-rearing years, I hadn't had a lot of extra time to be paying attention to the Palestinian art scene. But it's emerging in the States. We now have 2 museums that are dedicated to Palestinian art of some form in the U.S. One in Connecticut called the Palestine Museum U.S., and one in D.C. called the Museum of the Palestinian People. And then there are private collectors who have, quite significant collections, and things in other collections as well. And it's one of the things that I kind of thought, or came to think after looking at the other artists in this exhibit, and thinking about the Black art experience next to the Palestinian art experience, is I realized a couple things. One, I realized there probably are many more boxes like my dad's boxes in people's homes that should be found and cataloged and explained. But one of the features of trying to survive is not having the time and the energy and the capacity to do that. And so that process needs to happen at some point. But I also have been struck by the future-looking aspect of so much of African American art, especially in the last few years. There's been really big exhibits at the Met, at other huge institutions about Afrofuturism and all this sort of thing. And I realized that Palestinian art right now, we have like almost no vision of our future because we're not sure we're going to have one.
Wow.
Or we're not at all sure what
What that future looks like.
And I think that's a really interesting question. But even our rearward-looking art, our backward-looking art, has been kind of deficient in our real people. And this is one of the holes I feel like my dad's work fills, is that we do have a lot of artists who are depicting historic Palestine, but they tend to and this isn't a criticism, it's just a reality. A lot of the imagery sometimes is what I would call nostalgic, and because people have so little of the material reality left from their lives, they don't have photographs, they don't have ways to depict the actual people of their experience. So I feel like it's a hole that we need to fill, that we probably can fill, from amongst ourselves. But then this whole question of what does our future look like is really
That's
just
really,
kind of yawning.
That's
right
really open. Yeah, that's really open. Okay, we got time for one more, and then Dr. Webb, I'd like you to make a quick wrap up before we're done. Okay. All right. Good to
Really
see you.
quick, beautiful work, everyone. I'm a part of the Artists in Residence Ministry who helped hang the artwork, so we got to see it firsthand. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here today. My question to you all is, what would you all like for the viewers to get from your work? How would you like them to feel while viewing your pieces?
Andrea, what do you want the viewers to take from this?
I think as Dr. Webb touched on, how my work is, how I've had people interact with my work in the past, it's kind of they're coming within the space of the artwork and not vice versa. So it is kind of this three-dimensional experience that you kind of engulf in. So I think what I say for audience to do is to get engulfed in that experience. I think a lot of people say, I'll go back to your work and I find something new. How is that? And I was like, because they're showing you something new. And I think I'll touch on the mysticism I speak of in my work. I think a lot of people, when they talk about magic, Black girl magic in general is kind of this playful connotation, but magic in my work is actually real. Where I found and was able to tap into my work is actually where the mysticism and the stories and the folk tales I was told, whether they're superstitious or not, that's where the place I was able to find my artistic voice at. And that's what I tap into. So it doesn't have a rhyme or reason. It is something that's strictly based on faith and the spiritual, that I was kind of introduced through my mom, her having dreams, these very vivid dreams, kind of being this, I guess, kind of oracle within our family, and this kind of guidance for me to move in a more spiritual way that can't be easily explained. So I think audience, when you come with an open mind, come with eyes that are, ready to view things that you might have not seen before, but also be welcome to experience in their space.
That's great. So, all right, Pat, quickly, because we gotta get rolling. Patrick, give us a last question, please, sir.
Okay, so I just want Dr. Webb. This exhibit that we have upstairs is not the only part of this project. I just want to go a little, just tell us what's next, and because I know you mentioned a docu-series and other exhibits. So just very, quickly, just let us know where it's going next.
I will thank you, Patrick. I'll answer this question, but as a wrap up, as a wrapping commentary. So what might it mean to consider a people as sacred, right? What might it mean to to consider like the body, right? A community itself as a sacred text. Lynn Westville, I'm thinking about you in Wabash here. If part of the questions that we're asking ourselves in this moment is like, okay, got black artists and Palestinian artists and Lebanese artists kind of upstairs, and the artwork is cool, right? But what's the through line, right? In my estimation, kind of getting closer to this question, right? And centering something real regular and real ordinary, like people, right? Like the human form, like the human body, in its regular, ordinary, everyday, quotidian representation, right? But understanding that nevertheless, that body itself is a sacred text, okay? So that's different than saying we are a religious people and we have sacred texts that we read, and we have rituals and practices. Like, no, the people are sacred, the people as sacred text. And when we think about not just any people, but a black people, right? A Palestinian people, a Lebanese people, people groups who historically and in this very moment, right, are having to figure out what their life and existence looks like in the face of industries, nation states that are precisely saying you are not a sacred people, right? Part of the vision for this project is to imagine that differently, okay? That's the heart of this project for me, and this is what I've tried to string together. And what is coming next, we have a documentary film that we hope to release in summer of 2025. All these artists, as well as most of the other artists in the show, interviewed for this over the past few years, and the documentary is really intended to be a kind of capturing of the journey of the exhibit from start to finish, as well as a deeper dive into each of the artists and their work. Thank you all so much for being with us here. I'm going to turn it back over to Mitch, but I also wanted to just give a great heartfelt thanks to this community. So thanks so much to Trinity United Church of Christ, Pastor Moss for his vision, Mitch, Reverend LaShondra, and the entire media team, Patrick and the install team. None of this would be possible, Daryl, none of this would be possible had it not been for you all's commitment to me in this journey. So thank you all so much.
Give it up for our art panel. Give it up. Nothing more I could add to that. Thank you guys for coming. We got to exit church shortly. Daryl, you gonna come up and say something?
I was going to ask if you would do a closing prayer for us.
No worries.
Absolutely.
He's gonna close it.
Let us assume the posture of prayer that is most resonant with our own tradition. To the Holy One in all of your many names, we're just thankful for bringing us into this place, for this kind of project in this kind of time, right? To be in communion with each other. We are hopeful that as you send us out from this place, that you would let us leave from these doors, but never from your presence. Guide our feet. Let us always be mindful of our neighbors, of the works that our souls must do. And we promise to be mindful of you in all of the ways that we should. Right? Be that be our sacred text or nature or being in communion with each other. We recognize we are a people running short on time. And we just want to draw closer to you and to each other. Amen.
Thank you guys again. And feel free to speak with the artists as we're exiting the church. Oh, okay, all right.
trying to take a picture of us all.
Okay, right, there's always.
I got it. Back here. Oh, great, 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 great.